Ambassador Walter Thompson's diplomatic career ended the moment his fingers grazed the glowing orb of matrimony. He had no idea that this simple act would force him to marry the hideously ugly Princess of Bajor. The Bajoran High Council chamber erupted into chaos. Alien dignitaries shouted and gesticulated wildly, their elongated fingers pointing accusingly at the bewildered human. Walter stood frozen, his mind reeling as he tried to process the gravity of his mistake. "You have activated the sacred orb," declared High Counselor Kem, his ridged nose flaring with indignation. "By our most ancient laws, you must now wed Princess Kira and join the royal family." Walter's stomach churned at the mention of the princess. He had glimpsed her earlier that day, a grotesque figure lurking in the shadows of the palace. Her bulbous eyes had seemed to follow him, set in a face marred by irregular growths and sickly green patches. Even by Bajoran standards, she was considered repulsive. "There must be some mistake," Walter stammered, fighting down a wave of nausea. "I'm here on a diplomatic mission from Earth. I can't possibly marry your princess." Rigel, the Bajoran ambassador to Earth, stepped forward with a grave expression. "I'm afraid the law is clear, Ambassador Thompson. To refuse would nullify our alliance, an alliance your people desperately need." The weight of Rigel's words hit Walter like a physical blow. Earth was facing an imminent invasion by the ruthless Garaxian Empire. Without Bajoran technology and resources, humanity stood no chance of survival. "Surely we can find another solution," Walter pleaded, his voice cracking. "This law, it's archaic. Surely it can be changed or—" "Impossible," Kem interrupted sharply. "The orb of matrimony is sacred to our people. To overturn this law would spark a civil war that would tear Bajor apart. The alliance would be doomed either way." Walter's mind raced, searching desperately for a way out. But as the gravity of the situation sank in, he realized he was trapped. The fate of Earth rested on his shoulders, and his willingness to marry a bride whose very appearance made his skin crawl. With a deep breath, Walter squared his shoulders and met the High Counselor's gaze. "Very well," he said, his voice hollow. "For the sake of my people, I accept." A ripple of approval spread through the chamber. Rigel nodded solemnly, already calculating how to spin this disaster into a diplomatic triumph. In the shadows behind the council seats, a misshapen figure shifted, bulbous eyes gleaming with anticipation. As the Bajoran officials began discussing wedding preparations, Walter stood rooted to the spot. He had come to this alien world to secure humanity's future. Now that future depended on his marriage to a creature he could barely stand to look at. The fate of two worlds now rested on an unwilling groom and his grotesque bride. As Walter contemplated his impending nuptials, he wondered if he had just saved humanity or doomed himself to a fate worse than death. Walter's legs felt like lead as he followed the Bajoran attendant through the winding corridors of the royal palace. The gravity of his situation pressed down on him, each step bringing him closer to a future he had never imagined. When they reached his assigned quarters, the attendant bowed and left him alone with his thoughts. The room was opulent, adorned with intricate tapestries and gleaming metalwork that spoke of Bajor's rich cultural heritage. But Walter barely noticed the lavish surroundings. He paced back and forth, his mind racing as he sought a way out of his predicament. As he turned for another lap across the polished floor, something on the nightstand caught his eye. A small, unfamiliar device sat innocuously beside the bed. Curiosity momentarily overrode his anxiety, and he picked it up, turning it over in his hands. The device hummed to life at his touch, projecting a holographic interface. Walter's eyes widened as he realized what he was holding. A Bajoran universal translator, far more advanced than anything Earth had developed. He activated it, marveling at its capabilities. Not only did it translate spoken language with perfect accuracy, but it also provided detailed cultural context and explained nonverbal cues. An idea began to form in Walter's mind. If he couldn't escape this situation, perhaps he could navigate it more effectively with a deeper understanding of Bajoran culture. Over the next few days, Walter immersed himself in study. He pored over Bajoran history, customs, and etiquette, absorbing as much as he could through the translator. The device became his constant companion, whispering insights into his ear as he interacted with palace staff and officials. During his research, Walter stumbled upon an intriguing piece of information. There was an ancient Bajoran custom that allowed betrothed couples to undertake a series of trials to prove their compatibility before marriage. His heart quickened at the possibility. Could this be the diplomatic solution he sought? Meanwhile, in another wing of the palace, Princess Kira sat before an ornate mirror, her misshapen reflection staring back at her. She sighed heavily, the weight of her impending marriage to the Earth ambassador pressing down on her. "Your Highness," a soft voice called. Kira turned to see her handmaiden Lita entering the room with a tray of tea. "Lita, please," Kira said, her bulbous eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I don't know how I can go through with this marriage. The way the ambassador looked at me, I saw the revulsion in his eyes." Lita set down the tray and knelt beside her princess. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a hushed tone. "There's something you should know, Your Highness. Something I've kept secret for many years." Kira leaned closer, intrigued by her handmaiden's serious demeanor. "Your appearance," Lita continued, "it's not natural. It's the result of a curse placed on you by the rival Delore family when you were just an infant." Kira gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "A curse? But why wasn't I told?" "To protect you, Your Highness. But there's more. The curse can be broken, but only by a display of true love and acceptance from someone not of Bajoran blood." The implications of Lita's words hung heavily in the air. Could this arranged marriage be more than just a political alliance? Could it be her chance at breaking the curse? As these events unfolded within the palace, tensions between Earth and Bajor began to rise. The human delegation, led by Admiral Marcus Tucker, arrived on the planet to assess the situation. The Admiral's weathered face was set in a grim expression as he strode into the diplomatic chambers. "Ambassador Thompson," he barked, pulling Walter aside. "This marriage arrangement is causing quite a stir back home. We need this alliance, but not at the cost of one of our top diplomats being forced into an unwanted marriage." Walter nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle even more heavily on his shoulders. "You have 1 week," Admiral Tucker continued, his voice low and urgent. "Find a way out of this marriage without jeopardizing the alliance. That's an order." As Walter grappled with this new deadline, another threat was brewing in the shadows of Bajoran society. Gul Dukat, a charismatic leader of a faction of Bajoran extremists, gathered his followers in a secret meeting. "Brothers and sisters," he intoned, his eyes gleaming with fervor, "this unholy union between our princess and the Earth diplomat cannot be allowed to proceed. It threatens the very purity of our race. We must act, even if it means risking war with Earth." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembled crowd, unaware of the far-reaching consequences their actions might trigger. Back in the palace, Walter made his decision. Armed with his newfound knowledge of Bajoran culture, he requested an audience with the High Council. Standing before the assembled dignitaries, he took a deep breath and spoke. "Honorable Council, I have a proposal. I've learned of an ancient custom, the compatibility trials for betrothed couples. I formally request that Princess Kira and I undertake these trials." A buzz of surprised conversation filled the chamber. High Counselor Kem leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "You understand the significance of what you're asking, Ambassador?" Walter nodded solemnly. "I do, Your Excellency." After a moment of deliberation, Kem spoke. "Very well. We agree to your request, but know this. If you and Princess Kira pass all the trials, your union will be seen as blessed by the prophets. The marriage must then proceed without question." Walter's heart raced as he realized the double-edged nature of his proposal. He had sought a way out, but now he might have sealed his fate even more firmly. As he left the council chamber, his mind whirled with the challenges that lay ahead. Little did he know that these trials would test more than just his knowledge of Bajoran culture and his diplomatic skills. They would challenge his perceptions, his prejudices, and perhaps even his heart. As he prepared to face these trials alongside Princess Kira, Walter couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this situation, and to the princess herself, than met the eye. As Walter left the council chamber, His mind raced with the implications of his proposal. The compatibility trials loomed before him, a double-edged sword that could either save him from an unwanted marriage or bind him even more tightly to Princess Kira. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. The next morning, Walter and Princess Kira stood at the entrance to the Bajoran Caves of Prophecy. The jagged mouth of the cave yawned before them, dark and foreboding. Walter glanced at Kira, noting the determined set of her jaw despite the grotesque features that still made his stomach churn. "Are you ready, Ambassador?" Kira asked, her voice surprisingly melodious. Walter nodded, forcing a smile. "As ready as I'll ever be, Your Highness." They stepped into the cave, the cool air enveloping them as darkness swallowed the entrance. Walter activated a small luminator, casting a soft glow around them. The walls glittered with strange, iridescent minerals, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. As they ventured deeper, they encountered their first challenge, a vast chasm stretching across their path, too wide to jump. Walter's mind raced, recalling the information he had absorbed from the Bajoran translator. "Princess," he said, "I remember reading about Bajoran bridge-building techniques. If we gather some of those flexible vines and combine them with the sturdy branches over there, we might be able to construct a temporary bridge." Kira's bulbous eyes widened in surprise. "You've studied our ways, Ambassador. I'm impressed." Working together, they wove a sturdy rope bridge. As Walter watched Kira's deft movements, he noticed a subtle grace that seemed at odds with her appearance. He shook off the thought, focusing on the task at hand. They crossed the chasm and pressed on, soon finding themselves face to face with an intricate series of mechanical traps. Gears and levers lined the walls, connected to pressure plates on the floor. "This looks like a combination of Bajoran and off-world technology," Kira observed, her brow furrowed. Walter nodded, studying the mechanism. "You're right. I recognize some Earth-like components. If we combine our knowledge, we might be able to deactivate it." For the next hour they worked in tandem, Kira explaining Bajoran engineering principles, while Walter applied his understanding of Earth technology. Slowly but surely, they disarmed the traps, the final gear clicking into place with a satisfying thunk. As they progressed deeper into the cave system, Walter found himself stealing glances at Kira. In the dim light, he could have sworn her skin seemed to emit a faint pearlescent glow. Her movements, too, seemed more fluid and graceful than before. He blinked hard, attributing the observations to the strange lighting and his exhaustion. Finally, they reached a vast circular chamber. In its center stood a shimmering, translucent figure, a holographic projection of a Bajoran prophet. Its eyes, devoid of pupils, seemed to peer into their very souls. "Seekers," the prophet intoned, its voice echoing through the chamber, "you have reached the final test of this trial. Before you lies a choice that will determine not only your fate, but the fate of your peoples." The prophet waved its hand, and two shimmering portals appeared on opposite sides of the chamber. One path leads to personal happiness and freedom from your arranged marriage, but it will result in the dissolution of the alliance between your worlds. The other path will cement your union and the alliance, but at great personal sacrifice. You must choose, but you must choose together. Walter's heart raced. Here was the opportunity he had been seeking, a way out of the marriage. But as he turned to Kira, ready to argue for their freedom, he saw the fear in her eyes. Not fear of him, he realized, but fear for her people. In that moment, Walter's diplomatic instincts kicked in. He recalled the intricate web of Bajoran philosophy he had studied, the emphasis on the interconnectedness of all things. An idea formed in his mind. "Revered prophet," Walter said, his voice steady, "I propose a third option. Instead of choosing between personal happiness and the greater good, we choose to see them as one and the same. By committing to work together, to learn from each other and grow together, we can forge a stronger alliance, one based on mutual understanding and respect, rather than mere political necessity." Kira looked at him, her expression a mix of surprise and admiration. "Yes," she added, her voice gaining strength. "Our personal journey of understanding can be a model for our peoples. We choose the path of unity through diversity." The prophet was silent for a long moment, its featureless face unreadable. Then slowly, it nodded. Your wisdom is unexpected, but welcome. You have passed the first trial. As the hologram faded, the cave walls began to glow, revealing a hidden exit. Walter and Kira made their way out, blinking in the sudden sunlight. They were greeted by a cacophony of cheers and angry shouts from a gathered crowd. Rigel, the Bajoran ambassador, hurried over to them. "Congratulations on passing the first trial," he said, his voice low and urgent. "But I must warn you, Ambassador Thompson, the situation has become more complex. There are factions within our government who see your presence here as a threat." Walter nodded, the weight of the situation settling back on his shoulders. As he surveyed the crowd, he caught sight of Admiral Tucker's stern face. The Admiral's expression was clear. They needed to talk, urgently. As Kira was whisked away by her attendants, Walter felt a strange reluctance to see her go. The trial had changed something between them, though he couldn't quite define what. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the challenges ahead. The first trial was complete, but he knew the true test was just beginning. The first trial was complete, but he knew the true test was just starting. As Walter pondered the challenges ahead, a group of Bajoran officials approached. "Ambassador Thompson, Princess Kira," one of them announced, "please follow us. The second trial awaits." They were led to a massive structure on the outskirts of the city, the sacred Bajoran Arboretum. Its gleaming biodome stretched towards the sky, housing countless species of plants from across the planet. Before entering, Rigel pulled Walter aside. "Be cautious, Ambassador. This trial will test more than just your knowledge. The flora within can be unpredictable." Walter nodded, steeling himself as he and Kira stepped into the Arboretum. The air inside was thick with humidity, filled with a symphony of rustling leaves and distant animal calls. Kira's eyes widened as she took in the lush greenery surrounding them. "We must collect specific samples for a ritual," she explained, consulting a data pad. "But we need to be careful. Many plants here are dangerous." As they ventured deeper into the biodome, Walter found himself constantly glancing at Kira. Something about her seemed different. Her skin appeared clearer, her posture more confident. He shook his head, focusing on the task at hand. They approached a cluster of vibrant blue flowers. Kira reached out to collect a sample, but Walter grabbed her wrist. "Wait," he said, pointing to a nearly invisible strand of silk beside the plant. "That looks like a trap." Kira's eyes widened. "You're right. That's the web of a Bajoran venom spider. Their bite can be fatal." Working together, they carefully navigated around the web, collecting the sample without disturbing the spider's lair. As they moved on, Walter noticed Kira's movements becoming more graceful, her steps light and sure. Their teamwork was put to the test when they encountered a grove of tall, swaying plants with razor-sharp leaves. "Slicing reeds," Kira whispered. "We need a sample, but one wrong move, and we'll be cut to ribbons." Walter surveyed the area, then pointed to a fallen log nearby. "If we use that as a shield, we can push through safely." Kira nodded, impressed by his quick thinking. Together, they maneuvered the log through the reeds, emerging on the other side with the required sample and not a scratch on them. As they progressed, Walter found himself increasingly drawn to Kira. The grotesque features that had initially repulsed him were fading, replaced by an otherworldly beauty. He caught glimpses of clear, vibrant skin and eyes that sparkled with intelligence. Their final challenge came in the form of a massive, colorful flower that towered over them. Its petals pulsed with an eerie light, and a sickly sweet scent filled the air. "The dreamer's bloom," Kira gasped. "We need its pollen, but it's highly hallucinogenic. One breath and we'll be trapped in visions for hours." Walter's mind raced, recalling his briefings on Bajoran flora. "The pollen is only active when airborne, right? If we could collect it without disturbing the flower..." Kira's eyes lit up. "The dew collectors!" She pointed to a nearby tree with large cup-like leaves. "We can use those to gather the pollen without releasing it into the air." Working in perfect sync, they carefully collected the pollen, sealing it in a specialized container. As they turned to leave, a movement caught Walter's eye. A figure dressed as an arboretum worker lunged at them, a wicked-looking knife gleaming in his hand. Before Walter could react, Kira moved with startling speed and grace. She tackled the assailant, disarming him with a swift move. The attacker's head hit the ground hard, knocking him unconscious. Security forces quickly swarmed the area, apprehending the would-be assassin. As the adrenaline faded, Walter stared at Kira in amazement. Her appearance had changed dramatically. Her eyes were clear and bright, her skin smooth and radiant. "You saved my life," Walter said, still processing what had happened. Kira smiled, a genuine warmth in her expression. "We're in this together, Ambassador. Partners, remember?" As they exited the Arboretum, they were met by a grim-faced Rigel. "Congratulations on completing the second trial," he said, his tone serious. "But I'm afraid the situation outside has deteriorated. Anti-human riots have broken out in the capital. The human delegation has retreated to their embassy for safety." Walter's heart sank as he realized the gravity of the situation. The alliance he had worked so hard to build was crumbling around him. He turned to Kira, seeing the same concern reflected in her eyes. "We need to do something," she said, her voice filled with persistence. "These trials were meant to bring our people together, not tear them apart." Walter nodded, an idea forming in his mind. What if we combined the remaining trials into one final, public challenge? Something that could show everyone the benefits of human-Bajoran cooperation. Rigel considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. "It's risky, but it might be our only chance. I'll propose it to the High Council immediately." As Rigel hurried off, Walter and Kira exchanged a look of shared commitment. They had come too far to give up now. Whatever challenges lay ahead in this final trial, they would face them together. Little did they know that beneath the arena of unity, where their ultimate test would soon take place, Gul Dukat and his followers were already setting their own plans in motion. Plans that would unleash an ancient power neither humans nor Bajorans were prepared to face. Walter's heart raced as he and Kira stood before the massive doors of the Arena of Unity. The air crackled with tension, a mix of excitement and apprehension radiating from the gathered crowd. As the doors swung open, they were greeted by a cacophony of sound, cheers, boos, and everything in between. The arena was a marvel of Bajoran engineering, its high dome ceiling adorned with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and dance in the light. Thousands of spectators filled the tiered seating, their faces a sea of conflicting emotions. Walter glanced at Kira, noting the determined set of her jaw. Despite the changes he had observed in her appearance, she still bore the marks of the curse. Her features remained somewhat distorted, though less grotesque than before. He wondered if she felt as nervous as he did. The High Council members, resplendent in their ornate robes, stood on a raised platform. Their leader, a stern-faced woman with piercing eyes, stepped forward. "Ambassador Walter Thompson and Princess Kira of Bajor," her voice rang out, silencing the crowd. "You stand before us today to face the final trial. Your challenges will test not only your individual strengths, but your ability to work as one. Are you prepared?" Walter and Kira exchanged a quick look before responding in unison. "We are." The first challenge materialized before them, a sprawling obstacle course that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Platforms hovered at various heights, connected by narrow beams and swinging ropes. Holographic barriers flickered in and out of existence, adding an extra layer of complexity. Without hesitation, Walter and Kira launched themselves into the course. Walter's military training kicked in as he vaulted over barriers and swung across gaps with practiced ease. Kira moved with a fluid grace that belied her appearance, her Bajoran agility allowing her to navigate the more intricate sections of the course. As they progressed, Walter found himself marveling at how in sync they had become. When he stumbled on a particularly tricky section, Kira was there to steady him. When she hesitated before a daunting leap, he offered encouragement and a steadying hand. They crossed the finish line together, breathing hard but exhilarated. The crowd's reaction was mixed, but Walter could hear a growing number of cheers from both humans and Bajorans. Before they could catch their breath, the diplomatic challenge began. A holographic projection filled the center of the arena, depicting two alien races locked in bitter conflict. Walter recognized the scenario from his diplomatic training. It was a notoriously difficult case study that had stumped many seasoned negotiators. As they approached the holographic aliens, Walter felt a surge of confidence. He glanced at Kira, seeing the same perseverance in her eyes. They nodded to each other and began. Walter took the lead, his years of diplomatic experience guiding him as he addressed the root causes of the conflict. Kira, to his surprise and admiration, seamlessly integrated Bajorn's spiritual concepts into the negotiation, offering a unique perspective that seemed to resonate with both alien factions. Their back and forth felt like a perfectly choreographed dance. When Walter faltered, Kira smoothly took over. When she encountered resistance, he found just the right words to break through. As the simulation concluded with a successful peace treaty, Walter couldn't help but feel a swell of pride, not just in himself, but in what he and Kira had accomplished together. The crowd's reaction was noticeably warmer now, with pockets of enthusiastic applause breaking out across the arena. Even some of the High Council members nodded in approval. Just as Walter and Kira prepared for their final challenge, a deep rumble shook the arena. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and strange, shimmering energy fields began to appear throughout the structure. Panic erupted in the stands, as both humans and Bajorans found themselves trapped by the mysterious force fields. Walter's mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. Then he saw it, a flicker of movement in the shadows, a familiar face twisted with malice. Gul Dukat. "Kira," Walter said urgently, grabbing her arm. "This isn't part of the trial. Something's wrong." Kira's eyes widened as she scanned the chaos around them. "The ancient security system," she gasped. "It must have been activated." Walter's training kicked in, his mind already formulating a plan. "We need to shut it down. Can you guide us to the control center?" Kira nodded, her features set with commitment. As they navigated through the panicking crowd, Walter noticed that her movements had become even more graceful, her skin taking on a healthy glow despite the dire circumstances. They fought their way through the confusion, working in tandem to bypass energy fields and calm panicked citizens. Walter caught glimpses of Admiral Tucker coordinating with Bajoran security forces, organizing an evacuation effort. As they descended into the bowels of the arena, the ancient Bajoran technology became more apparent. Walls lined with pulsing crystals and humming conduits surrounded them. Walter's eyes darted from one unfamiliar system to another, his mind working overtime to decipher their purpose. "There," Kira pointed to a central console, its surface covered in arcane symbols. "That's the main control unit." They rushed to the console, their hands flying over the controls. Walter's technical knowledge merged seamlessly with Kira's understanding of Bajoran systems. As they worked, the ground continued to shake, and distant screams echoed from above. "Wait," Walter said suddenly, his eyes widening in realization. "This system, it's connected to the orb of matrimony. Kira, I think we've been fulfilling its purpose all along." Kira's breath caught as understanding dawned on her face. The challenges, our cooperation, it was all a test. With renewed purpose, they redoubled their efforts. Their hands moved in perfect synchronization, inputting complex sequences and bypassing security protocols. As they worked, Walter became acutely aware of the changes in Kira. Her features were softening, becoming more refined with each passing moment. Just as the tremors reached a fever pitch, Walter and Kira input the final command sequence together. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then with a great sigh, the energy fields dissipated, and the shaking ground stilled. Silence fell over the arena, broken only by the sound of their heavy breathing. Walter turned to Kira, ready to congratulate her on their success, and froze. Standing before him was not the cursed princess he had come to know, but a stunningly beautiful Bajoran woman. Her skin glowed with health, her features perfectly proportioned and striking. Kira's eyes, now clear and bright, met his with a mixture of wonder and uncertainty. Before either could speak, a cheer erupted from above. The crowd, having witnessed their efforts through the arena's monitoring systems, was applauding wildly. Humans and Bajorans alike were embracing, the shared danger having bridged the gap between them. The High Council descended to their level, their faces a mix of awe and approval. The stern-faced leader stepped forward, her voice ringing out with authority. "Ambassador Thompson, Princess Kira," she announced, "you have not only passed the final trial, but have proven the true value of human-Bajoran cooperation. The ancient law has served its purpose." She paused, her gaze softening slightly. You are now free to choose your own path forward, together or apart. Walter and Kira stood in the center of the ancient control room, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. The future of human-Bajoran relations hung in the balance, along with their own personal futures. As they faced each other, a silent understanding passed between them. Whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced these trials. Together. Together. The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Walter opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, a commotion erupted from the entrance to the control room. Admiral Tucker burst in, his face etched with worry. Walter, we've got a situation, he said, his voice tight. I just received an urgent transmission from Earth. The Krolax have launched their invasion earlier than we anticipated. Earth's defenses are barely holding. The news hit Walter like a physical blow. He exchanged a quick glance with Kira, seeing his own concern mirrored in her eyes. How bad is it? Walter asked, already dreading the answer. Tucker's expression darkened. Bad. They're requesting immediate assistance. We need Bajoran technology to repel the attack, and we need it now. As if on cue, the High Council members entered the room, their faces grave. The stern-faced leader stepped forward, addressing Walter and Kira. In light of recent events, we have convened an emergency session, she announced. The true purpose of the marriage law and the orb of matrimony has been revealed. We have decided to formally amend the law, allowing you both to choose whether to proceed with your union. Under different circumstances, this news would have been cause for celebration. Now it felt almost inconsequential in the face of Earth's peril. Walter's mind raced, trying to formulate a plan. Before he could respond, a deafening explosion rocked the building. Alarms blared, and the room's holographic displays flickered to life, showing chaos erupting across the Bajoran capital. What's happening? Kira demanded, her newly refined features set with purpose. One of the council members manipulated the controls, bringing up a security feed. The image showed Gul Dukat, his face twisted with malice, standing in the capital's central defense command. People of Bajor, Dukat's voice rang out, I have taken control of our defenses to protect us from the human threat. All humans must leave Bajor immediately, or I will use our advanced weapons to destroy their fleet in orbit. Walter's heart sank as he watched pockets of violence erupting across the city. Dukat had used the chaos of the invasion news to rally his extremist faction and stage a coup. We need to retake control of the capital, Walter said, his military training kicking in. He turned to Admiral Tucker and Kira. If we can't secure Bajoran aid, Earth doesn't stand a chance against the Krolax. Kira nodded, her eyes flashing with purpose. I know the layout of the government complex. If we can get inside, we might be able to override Dukat's control. I can coordinate with our fleet in orbit, Tucker added. We'll need to be ready for anything. As they began to formulate a plan, Rigel entered the room, accompanied by a group of loyal Bajoran security forces. We're at your disposal, he said, nodding to Walter and Kira. Walter quickly outlined their strategy. He would lead a small team to disable the defense systems, while Kira and Rigel worked to regain control of the communications array. Tucker would coordinate with the human fleet, preparing for a potential confrontation with Dukat's forces. As the others prepared, Walter pulled Kira aside. They stood close, the air between them charged with unspoken emotions. Kira, Walter began, his voice low, I know this isn't the time, but whatever happens out there, I want you to know that these past few days have meant more to me than I can express. Kira's eyes softened and she reached out to touch his arm. I feel it too, Walter. But you're right. We can't think about that now. Let's focus on saving both our worlds. After that, she left the sentence unfinished, a promise hanging in the air between them. With a final shared look of understanding, they rejoined the others. The assault team moved out, slipping through the chaotic streets of the Bajoran capital. Walter led his group towards the defense systems, using his knowledge of the ancient security protocols to bypass the outer perimeter. As they approached the main control hub, Walter's team encountered unexpected resistance. The corridors were filled with a strange, pulsing energy field that seemed to repel their weapons. This isn't Bajoran tech, one of Walter's team members hissed. Realization dawned on Walter as he recognized the alien design. "It's Krolax," he said, his blood running cold. Dukat must have allied himself with a splinter group. They've given him advanced weaponry in exchange for Bajoran technology. The implications were staggering. If Dukat succeeded, it could lead to a full-scale Krolax invasion of Bajor. The stakes had just gotten exponentially higher. Meanwhile, Kira and Rigel's team fought their way towards the communications array. Kira moved with a fluid grace that surprised even her transformed body responding with speed and strength she had never known before. They burst into the main control room, coming face-to-face with Dukat's top lieutenant. Without hesitation, Kira launched herself at the enemy, engaging in a fierce hand-to-hand combat that showcased her newfound abilities. As Kira grappled with the lieutenant, Rigel worked feverishly to regain control of the systems. Alarms blared, and through the room's windows, they could see flashes of weapons fire in the sky above. In orbit, Admiral Tucker's voice crackled over the comm systems of the human fleet. "Evasive maneuvers! Dukat's launched a missile barrage!" The human ships twisted and turned, but several took heavy hits. Tucker watched in dismay as damage reports flooded in. The fleet was now vulnerable, caught between Dukat's weapons and the looming threat of Krolax reinforcements. Back in the heart of the government complex, Walter's team finally broke through the Krolax defenses. They raced into the central control room, only to find Gul Dukat waiting for them, a sinister smile playing on his lips. "You're too late, Ambassador," Dukat sneered, his hand hovering over a glowing console. "With one push of this button, I can bring the full might of the Krolax down on both our worlds. Unless, of course, you're willing to negotiate." Walter's mind raced, searching for a solution. He knew they were out of time. Earth was under attack, the human fleet was in peril, and now Bajor itself hung in the balance. Whatever he did next would determine the fate of both their peoples. Just then, Kira burst into the room, her eyes locking with Walter's. In that moment of shared understanding, a plan began to form. They would have one chance to stop Dukat, secure Bajoran aid for Earth, and prevent a full-scale war. As they moved into action, Walter knew that the true test of their relationship, in the alliance between humans and Bajorans, was only beginning to unfold. Walter locked eyes with Kira, a silent plan forming between them. In that instant, they moved as one. Walter lunged forward, his body low and fast. "Now, Kira!" Kira vaulted over a nearby console, her newly enhanced physique allowing her to move with unprecedented speed and grace. She landed behind Dukat, immediately engaging him in close combat. Caught off guard, Dukat stumbled back, his hand jerking away from the console. Walter seized the opportunity, diving for the controls and quickly inputting a series of commands to lock down the system. "You fools!" Dukat snarled, struggling against Kira's grip. "You have no idea what you're interfering with." Walter turned to face him, his voice steady. "We know exactly what we're doing, Dukat. We're stopping you from making a catastrophic mistake." As Kira held Dukat at bay, Walter accessed the communication systems. "Admiral Tucker, do you read me?" Tucker's voice crackled through, tinged with relief and urgency. "Loud and clear, Walter. We've got a situation up here. Krolax reinforcements are approaching fast. ETA less than 2 hours. Walter's mind raced. "Understood. We've neutralized Dukat's immediate threat, but we need to act fast." He turned to Kira, who had Dukat pinned against the wall. "Kira, the ancient Bajoran security system, can we use it?" Kira's eyes widened with realization. "Yes, but it requires 2 operators, 1 human, 1 Bajoran." "Then let's do it," Walter said, moving to her side. Dukat laughed bitterly. "You don't know what you're dealing with. The Krolax will crush your pathetic alliance. I was securing Bajor's future." Walter faced him, his expression hardening. "No, Dukat, you were dooming it. We have intelligence from Earth. The Krolax never intended to honor any agreement. They would have stripped Bajor of its technology and left it defenseless." Doubt flickered across Dukat's face, but he quickly masked it with a sneer. "You're lying." Ignoring him, Walter and Kira approached the ancient control panel. Its surface glowed with symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and change as they watched. "Ready?" Kira asked, her hand hovering over the controls. Walter nodded, placing his hand next to hers. Together. As their hands touched the panel, a surge of energy pulsed through the room. The air crackled with electricity, and the floor beneath them trembled. Holographic displays sprang to life around them, showing a vast network of energy conduits spreading across the planet. "It's working," Kira exclaimed, her fingers dancing over the controls with newfound expertise. Walter watched in awe as a massive energy shield began to form around Bajor. The shield expanded rapidly, encompassing the planet and extending out into space. On the displays, they could see Dukat's missiles harmlessly impacting the barrier, dissipating into nothing. Admiral Tucker's voice came through again, filled with amazement. "Walter, what did you do? The Krolax advanced ships just hit some kind of energy field. They can't get through." "We've activated Bajor's planetary defense grid," Walter replied, his eyes fixed on the displays. "It should buy us some time." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the control room. Dukat had broken free from his restraints and was furiously working at a secondary console. "If I can't have Bajor, no one will," he roared, his fingers flying over the controls. Walter's blood ran cold as he realized what Dukat was doing. He's trying to overload the defense grid. If he succeeds, it'll destroy both our fleets and half of Bajor's surface. Kira moved to stop him, but Walter held her back. "No, we can't leave the controls. The shield will collapse. I'll have to talk him down." Walter stepped towards Dukat, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Gul Dukat, think about what you're doing. This isn't just about you or your ambitions anymore. The lives of millions of Bajorans are at stake." Dukat's hand hesitated over the final command. "Why should I listen to you, human?" "Because despite everything, I believe you care about Bajor," Walter said, his voice calm but intense. "You've always claimed to have Bajor's best interests at heart. Prove it now. Help us save your people." As Walter spoke, he could see Kira working frantically at the main console, attempting to counteract Dukat's sabotage. The room hummed with energy, the ancient systems straining under the conflicting commands. Suddenly, the doors burst open. Rigel entered, followed by a group of moderate Bajoran leaders. They took in the scene before them, shock and persistence on their faces. "Dukat, stand down," Rigel commanded, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "We've been monitoring the situation. Your coup has failed." Dukat looked around wildly, seeing his supporters melting away in the face of this new opposition. His shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. Taking advantage of the moment, Walter stepped forward. "Gul Dukat, it's over. But you can still help us. Your knowledge of the Krolax could be invaluable in the coming battle." Before Dukat could respond, he reached for a small device on his belt, the personal teleporter provided by his Krolax allies. But as he activated it, the ancient Bajoran security system flared to life. Instead of disappearing, Dukat found himself engulfed in a shimmering stasis field, frozen in place. With the immediate threat neutralized, Walter and Kira turned their attention back to the looming Krolax invasion. They quickly established a joint command center, integrating Bajoran technology with human military strategies. As they worked, the High Council convened an emergency session. Within hours, they emerged with a historic decision. Not only would they uphold the alliance with Earth, but they would strengthen it, offering full access to Bajoran technology and military support. Admiral Tucker's face appeared on the main view screen, his expression grim but determined. "Walter, Kira, we've got news from Earth. The first wave of the Krolax invasion has been repelled, thanks to the Bajoran shield technology, but our long-range sensors are picking up a massive fleet gathering at the edge of the solar system. This is just the beginning." Walter and Kira exchanged a look, the weight of their responsibility settling on their shoulders. They had averted one crisis, but an even greater challenge loomed on the horizon. As the combined human and Bajoran fleet took up defensive positions around both planets, Walter found a quiet moment with Kira. They stood close, the air between them charged with unspoken emotions. "Kira," Walter began, his voice low, "I know this isn't the time, but I need you to know." Kira placed a finger on his lips, silencing him gently. "I know, Walter. I feel it too. But you're right. This isn't the time. We have a war to win first. Walter nodded, understanding passing between them. Together they turned back to the command center, ready to face whatever the Krolax might throw at them. The ultimate test of the human-Bajoran alliance was about to begin, and the fate of both their worlds hung in the balance. Balance. The ultimate test of the human-Bajoran alliance was about to begin, and the fate of both their worlds hung in the balance. Suddenly, the space around Bajor lit up with brilliant flashes of light. The Krolax invasion force emerged from hyperspace, their massive fleet dwarfing the combined human-Bajoran defenses. Walter and Kira, standing side by side on the bridge of the Allied flagship, watched as the enemy ships filled the view screen. "All ships, battle stations!" Admiral Tucker's voice rang out over the comms. "Engage at will!" The space between the two fleets erupted in a dazzling display of weapons fire. Plasma torpedoes and energy beams crisscrossed the void, striking shields and hulls with devastating force. The Allied ships, though outnumbered, fought with fierce dedication. Walter's eyes darted across the tactical display, his mind racing. "Kira, look at their formation. They're trying to encircle us." Kira nodded, her enhanced senses taking in every detail of the battle. "We need to break their lines before they can complete the maneuver." As they coordinated the defense, Walter's brow furrowed in concentration. An idea began to form in his mind, drawing on his knowledge of Bajoran technology and human tactics. "The ancient security system," he said, turning to Kira. "What if we could use it to create a network of miniature wormholes throughout the battlefield?" Kira's eyes widened with realization. "It's possible, but we've never attempted anything on this scale before." "Can you do it?" Walter asked, his hand resting on her shoulder. She met his gaze, drive blazing in her eyes. "With the right team, yes. I'll need to work with engineering to modify the system." As Kira rushed off to implement the plan, Walter took command of the tactical operations. He directed the Allied ships to hold their positions, drawing the Krolax forces closer. Minutes felt like hours as the battle raged on. The Krolax pressed their advantage, their superior numbers threatening to overwhelm the defenders. Allied ships fell one by one, their destruction marking the sky with brief, brilliant flares. Just as the situation seemed most dire, Kira's voice crackled over the comm. "Walter, we're ready. The wormhole network is coming online now." Walter's fingers flew over the tactical controls, inputting new commands. "All ships, prepare for tactical jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." In an instant, the battlefield transformed. Allied ships blinked out of existence, only to reappear moments later in completely different locations. The Krolax formation, once an organized array of firepower, devolved into chaos as their targets vanished and reappeared at will. "It's working!" Walter exclaimed, watching as the Allied forces used the wormholes to outmaneuver their opponents. Ships darted in and out of the miniature portals, striking at the confused Krolax vessels before disappearing again. As the tide of battle began to turn, Admiral Tucker's voice came through the comm. "Walter, Kira, we're launching our assault on the Krolax flagship. Cover us!" Walter watched as Tucker's strike team maneuvered towards the massive enemy ship. Using the intelligence gathered from Dukat's captured Krolax allies, they had pinpointed a weakness in the flagship's defenses. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the Allied flagship. "Sir," a tactical officer called out, "we've got multiple breaching pods attached to our hull. The Krolax are boarding." Walter turned to Kira, who had just returned to the bridge. "We need to repel those boarders. You know this ship better than anyone. Lead the way." Kira nodded, already moving towards the door. "Let's go." They raced through the corridors, gathering a team of security personnel as they went. The ship shuddered as the Krolax breaching pods burned through the outer hull. As they approached the first breach point, Walter and Kira exchanged a quick glance. No words were needed. Months of working together had honed their ability to communicate silently. The moment the Krolax troops burst through the hull, Walter and Kira sprang into action. Walter's combat training came to the fore as he engaged the first enemy, his movements precise and lethal. Beside him, Kira moved with inhuman grace, her enhanced physique allowing her to dance between opponents. They fought their way through the ship, repelling boarders at each breach point. Their teamwork was flawless, each anticipating the other's moves and covering any vulnerabilities. As they cleared the last group of Krolax invaders, a message came through from Admiral Tucker. "We've done it. We've captured the Krolax Supreme Commander. They're calling for a ceasefire." Walter and Kira made their way back to the bridge, arriving just in time to see the remaining Krolax ships begin their retreat. The view screen showed the enemy fleet jumping to hyperspace, leaving behind the wreckage of a hard-fought battle. As the adrenaline of combat faded, Walter and Kira found themselves standing side by side on the observation deck. They watched in silence as the last Krolax ship disappeared, leaving only the stars and the distant orb of Bajor. Kira turned to Walter, her eyes shining with a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. "We did it. We actually did it." Walter nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "We make a good team." As they stood there looking out at the stars, both knew that this victory was just the beginning. The alliance between humans and Bajorans had been tested in the fires of battle and emerged stronger than ever. But as they basked in the glow of their success, neither could have predicted the challenges and choices that lay ahead. Choices that would test not just their alliance, but their hearts as well.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. And for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.